Lovely, lovely bio and welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Gretzko, as Christine said, and I'm happy to be here today and share with you a topic that I'm assuming is of interest to all of you. That's why you're here. But I've been spending a lot of time with the executives that I work with on a daily basis. And that's about how do you lead with clarity and how do you show up as a leader with clarity when you yourself may not be so clear and may not actually be getting that clarity from those above you. So we'll spend a bit of time on that. Before I get into what we're going to do today in our goals, as Christine mentioned, I graduated from Maryland in 2001. I was actually born and raised in Maryland and left after I graduated Maryland for New York. I've now been in New York 25 years, so actually longer than I've been in Maryland. But I live just north of New York City with my husband. I have twins who are about to turn 13, so wish me luck. In about a month, they'll be 13. And because it wasn't exciting enough in our home, we just adopted a new puppy in November. So we are adjusting to life with a puppy and all the things that go with that. Um, so maybe what we'll do to get started is I am going to be asking you to use the chat as we go through the next hour together. And so if you guys can use the chat right now and just type in where you're joining from. So I'm joining from Chappaqua, New York, but tell me where you're joining us from. College Park, Maryland, Los Angeles. Oh, can you send your weather my way? I still have a lot of snow on the ground.
We're expecting 2 inches of rain on Monday, which
Oh,
for us is a lot. So,
okay. All right. Well, that makes me actually feel better because I'm always like, it's always so nice. Oh, Baltimore, Maryland, nice. It's my hometown. South Carolina, Arlington, more from College Park. Seaford, New York, nice. College Park. Howard County, very nice. I know Howard County well, Angela. Clarksburg, I know Clarksburg well too. DC. Wall, New Jersey. I don't know where that is, but I know New Jersey. I spend a lot of time on the turnpike going between New York and Maryland. All right, perfect. So it looks like our chat functionality is working. As I said, there'll be a couple times throughout where if you have a question, please feel free to utilize that. It might take me a minute to see it and react to it, but I'll also be asking for some participation. In my experience, having done a lot of these sessions, especially virtually, it's always nice to make sure that we can have that conversation, even when it seems very one-sided. So I prefer a conversation, and that's going to be my goal for today is to make this more of a conversation and make sure we can actually address some of your practical questions. So leading with clarity. So as I said, we're going to talk about some practical habits for leading with clarity, even when you yourself may be unclear. And the goals for today are number one, just to level set what it actually means to lead with clarity and why it matters, especially for leaders. Apply a framework that you can use with your teams. As with all frameworks, this is directional, but it's something that I've used at different organizations that I've been part of, really just to help leaders be able to ground themselves in a place to start when they're kind of in that frame of mind where they're not clear. And then towards the end, I did add something to this presentation around some additional habits about how you can be steady in uncertain times. It feels to me like the world is really heavy right now. And I know, being part of a large organization, we've been dealing with a lot of that and a lot of questions from employees and others. And so I'm going to share something we've started to share with our leaders and how they can think about how you can remain steady in uncertain times, which obviously ties very nicely into the concept of clarity. So we'll begin. Why does clarity matter? So this probably won't be a surprise, but ambiguity is constant across all industries. as I mentioned, I've had experience in different organizations, and one of the consistencies actually is there's ambiguity everywhere. And it is especially hard as you start leading teams and the teams get bigger, to be able to show up and have some sort of stability, and really make sure that you're communicating consistently. Lack of clarity slows momentum. So I don't know about all of you, but I've certainly, the organizations I've been part of are typically asking our people to do more with less. And so we are all, I think, a bit overburdened, and our people are at risk of burnout. And really just focusing time on things that might not be the best use of their time or what we really need them focused on. And leaders create clarity without full certainty. So kind of on this level setting, one of the things I work really closely with leaders on is the difference between clarity and certainty. Certainty is something that as humans we just want, and we really strive for. And in a lot of cases, you just can't have it. A lot of things that we want certainty on, we're never going to be able to have that. But what you can have is clarity. And that's what we're going to explore a little bit today is even taking ambiguity as a constant, taking change as a constant. How can we still be able to create clarity for ourselves and for others? Oops. Okay, so this is the audience participation part. So, pulse check. Where does lack of clarity show up most for you? So, use the chat and just type a couple words answering that question. It could be things like roles, accountability, decision making, communication. But give me something around where does lack of clarity show up most for you? What's happening there? Delegating, that's a good one. Direction and communication. Communication and roles. Direction, especially career related. Communication from upper level management, that's a very common one, and I hear that a lot in my organization and at organizations I've been part of. Roles and communication. So a lot of consistency here actually around roles and communication, direction, direction up and down the chain. So, as you can see, we're all dealing with actually kind of very similar things behind the lack of clarity. And obviously, when you look at these things, if there's lack of clarity around direction, decision making, that really gets in the way of us being able to do the things that we need to do, and do them in the most impactful way. And so, what can we do to actually address that? I'm going to share a framework that we've started using, specifically at PayPal, but I've used other places as well. PayPal, in case you guys haven't been following, we have a lot of change going on. About a week and a half ago, our board removed our CEO, and we will be getting a new CEO. So there's just a lot going on at the moment there. And, an environment like that is ripe for lack of clarity. And one of the things that we've been doing with our leaders, from a leadership development perspective, is really focusing on leading with clarity as one of our prioritized leadership capabilities. And so I share a framework with those folks, and we do a bit of an exercise that I'll adapt here since we're virtual. But let me take you through the framework first. So here's the framework. And again, this is just directional. This is a framework, but it helps give you a more disciplined way in thinking about how you can show up and lead with clarity, again, for yourself, but also for others. So the first step in the framework is reflect. So this is where you actually consider your own degree of clarity on the path forward and how it might be impacting others. So it's the time that you take and you actually just sit with it and say, do I have clarity? If not, why not? And how is my potential lack of clarity actually impacting others? This is obviously especially important if you have a team or you're leading or driving a team. So once you've reflected and you kind of have current state, I understand where I am. The next step in this framework is assess. So take stock of your team's needs, mindset, and abilities, and how that might inform your approach. So this is where you're really trying to put on the shoes of those around you and think about what are they actually thinking about? What's going on there? What might they be perceiving? I think one of the things I found in going through this exercise with leaders is a lot of times we don't communicate because we don't know. And what ends up happening is others then make up different stories and narratives that actually aren't the truth. But in the absence of anything else, that's all they have to go on. So assesses are really about understanding baseline where others are so that you can think about how you might address that. And those are really the last two parts of the framework. So build is coming up with ideas based on, again, where you yourself are, where others around you and your team are. What are some of the things that you could start doing to address some of that? And then activate is really about how do you actually start doing this and sustain it? So it's great to come up with ideas around what you might want to do, but if you don't actually do the stuff, it doesn't actually matter. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. And I want to ask you, you guys gave me a lot of good thoughts in the chat around what it is that is really driving that lack of clarity or where that lack of clarity shows up. So I want you to think about a situation where you don't have clarity today. This can be personal, this can be professional, it doesn't matter. Um, and then what I want you to do, again, thinking about reflect as part of our framework, is think about, am I myself clear about where there is ambiguity? So it's one thing to say, I'm not clear and I don't have clarity. It's another thing to be very specific about what exactly aren't you clear on. And then the second thing, assess, is where am I meeting my team member or team? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a couple of minutes on individual reflection on those two pieces. And here are the two prompts. So think about your situation. Where are you clear and where are you not? And then think about where your team, or if it's not team, it's just others around you, may be experiencing ambiguity. Take a couple minutes and jot down answers to those questions, and then I'll open it up to have a bit of a conversation. Christina, we should have had music for the silent parts. I forgot.
Yes. I don't think anyone wants me to sing though, so I won't do that to you. Oh,
Give everyone another minute. Okay, now I'm gonna actually open it up and ask for some volunteers, some brave souls, to help us with our group discussion. So you jotted down some answers to the prompts, and it's okay if you haven't thoroughly formulated that. It's just something to get you started. But I would love for a couple of folks to share a bit about what their situation was. And then, based on what you just jotted down in the individual reflection, where is that ambiguity coming from? How might you be contributing? And then, what do you think the team needs most right now? You can come off mute. I think we can hear everybody.
I think I have a thought that might be relatable for a lot of people. With that, um, expectations, maybe. A lot of people
You're breaking up a little bit for us.
have.
That's better.
Sorry, let me take the headphones off. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can hear you better. Thank you. And tell me your name.
John.
John, nice to meet you.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people maybe have experienced within their teams some ambiguity around expectations. Um, should they be working to grow or putting in just what is expected? Like sometimes people maybe do less than what's expected. There's like incentives involved with all of that too. But
Yeah,
yeah, I would say the ambiguity would be like how much effort should a team member put in?
great. And how might you be contributing to that?
Um, as a leader,
Mhm.
um, it would be the clarity piece, I guess. Laying out those expectations ahead of time,
Mhm.
or lack thereof.
Right. Great. That's a great one. And I think that does come up time and again, which is misaligned expectations. So an individual may, be thinking they're, focused in one area on one thing, to your point, um, thinking about whether it's their career or something else that they're optimizing, which might be very different than the team leader. I will say, and you said this, a lot of times what we find is a lack of communication is what's leading to the lack of clarity. And so it's being able to understand how to have some of those conversations with other people to actually address whatever either the miscommunication is or the elephant in the room. Sometimes we like to talk around people and not directly to people. But even to show up, asking questions of our team, and also using the opportunity when somebody is sharing something, maybe a team member is sharing something with you, for you to be able to say, why were you working on that? Why were you focused on that? So giving people the opportunity to explain why they thought they were doing something. Because again, what you find sometimes in that conversation is people were either making assumptions that the other person was not making, or they were actually interpreting something differently. So, the two of us, John, could look at, the same email, even the same prompt, and we could interpret that differently. And that a lot of times is what can lead to confusion and lack of clarity. Great. Thank you, John, for being our brave
Thanks.
first sharer.
I just wanted to add to that, from
Yeah.
what you said, assumptions. I think a lot of people might go into a job or a new role, and their assumption is that if they work above and beyond expectations, that
Mm.
could lead to a promotion or something. But maybe for that organization, that's not what they want.
Mm.
And same with the flip side of that, they might come in there not wanting to grow and just stay put, and the expectation is that they should be growth oriented. So
Yeah, that's great.
if
And
that's not laid out, then
yeah, and I think something else you're bringing up, we all bring with us different experiences and perspectives based on our past experience. And we don't always know the other people in the room or that we're working with, what their, past lived experiences are. And that also is where we see, again, some lack of clarity coming up where I'm used to doing things one way, or I've been managed one way, or the culture at a place where I was a certain way. I come to a new place and it's different. And it's hard for me to really understand what those differences are and get up to speed, again, if no one is explicit about it. Great. Can I get another example?
Hi, I am Lynn Marie. So I feel like ambiguity haunts me. Like I know exactly where it is, like where it shows up in my work. Like specifically, we will have tasks that seem very high priority, but then something else comes up and then priority shifts. And
Hmm.
it's like, well, do I continue working on this thing? And if we leave it on the back burner long enough, somebody might forget about it, and then maybe in a couple months it comes around again, and we're like scrambling, trying to figure out like, well, why didn't we finish that thing? Or where are we?
Hmm.
What's the status there? So, I don't know if that's like an ambiguity problem or
Well, I think it's first of all, I think it's a very common problem. I will tell you, when I hear from folks at my organization, that's a lot of what it is, which is, first of all, everything seems to be a priority, right? So when everything's a priority, it's like nothing's a priority. And then to your point, it's like, what is the fire drill of the week that everyone then is focused on? And you almost forget the other stuff that you were actually working on. So
yeah.
let's play it out a little bit. So the ambiguity is coming from because priorities seem like they're constantly shifting. People are working on one thing, maybe the next week it's something out, something else. How might you be contributing to that spin?
I I know exactly how. I am not I think I don't have the capacity to just like keep
Okay.
track of everything that's going on. So it's like one of my ongoing goals to like, develop or improve my tracking system.
Hmm.
And when I have time, go back to things and try to complete them or get other people to finish their parts. But that's where I run into a lot of issues.
Yeah. And so that's great. And I love actually the self-awareness about, kind of there's a difference between knowing what to do and then actually having the space and capacity to do it. What do you think the team needs most right now? What would be most helpful to those people that are working for you?
Oh, I would love to just get us all together in like in person, everyone, because we have team members who are like remote some days, in office some days. So get us all together in office and we just like, figure out what are we like, at least so I work at UMD, like for this spring semester, what do we want to see ourselves completing by the end of the spring semester?
Right.
And like, let's focus on that. And then we could think about summer when we have, less students around and we have more time for strategic planning. What do we want to achieve then? And sort of chunk it or break it up like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And, I mean, you called out some of the stuff. It's, taking the time to actually do that. I do a different capability around decision making, but we talk about decision making frameworks. And and many of you probably have used different decision making frameworks at different institutions or organizations. But one of the things that a decision making framework does is it forces people to actually slow down at the beginning to outline a number of things, right? Who's driving this work? Who's the ultimate owner? Who's going to be accountable for the outcome of this work? What are the key, gates or milestones that we need to be thinking about? And there's something that happens when you actually sit down and start, actually documenting those things, that it actually starts providing clarity around what is the problem you're actually solving. And when I do a piece on decision making, we actually spend time around what is the thing that you're actually solving, and being crystal clear on what exactly is the decision that needs to be made. Because a lot of times we stay up almost a level above, and it's a little bit challenging to get that specificity. And if you don't have the specificity, or you don't have the time to actually do that, the capacity and the time to actually do that, then you're going to be kind of in that constant state of spin, and not able to then have any clarity for yourself or for other people. And honestly, probably at some point just feel overwhelmed. Like you want to just throw up your arms, and it's like, why am I even trying? I just can't keep up with it.
Yeah. No, this is very, very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for those two shares. I'll keep us moving so we can get through some more of the content. If you have other thoughts or questions, like I said, please feel free to put them in the chat. So when you're thinking about, so we've done the part around really thinking about reflecting on where you yourself are, and then assessing the needs of others around you. When you're actually getting to, okay, what the heck do I do now? There's an interesting way to think about that, and that's to really understand what's the purpose of clarity in this situation, right? So, we heard two different examples. You guys all have a scenario, hopefully you jotted down yourselves, which is likely different than what you heard. And what we typically find is there's three different ways that you want to be thinking about leading with clarity. It may be because you need to actually create clarity from the beginning of something to build momentum. So you're creating clarity from the go, you're starting from, zero, and you need to think about how are you getting people to go in that direction that you need to go, when there's, nothing else that they've been doing. The second one is, how do you continue to maintain clarity? So we've kicked off, maybe there was clarity at the beginning, but as was just mentioned, there's a shift in priorities. Or in my own example at PayPal, we now have a new CEO. So how do you maintain that clarity to reinforce direction and sustain focus? And then the last one is being able to respond in real time, where you might actually have to recalibrate and reclarify. And this goes to the point that we are in this environment of rapid change, and ambiguity. And so there actually are times where it's a good exercise to take a step back. By the way, this could be it could be the thing you've been working on, whatever the thing is, but maybe you have new team members, or like I said, there's been some sort of significant shift at the institution or the organization, or new data has come to light. So how do you actually take a pause and think about where you might have to recalibrate and reclarify again, so that you're just not assuming that everyone who maybe was part of the kickoff of the project or the initiative actually understands what it is that they want to be doing. What I'm going to share with you next is some inspiration. So typically how I find these sessions the most useful is we talk a little bit about the theoretical, right? The framework, which is what I've shared with you. I'm now going to provide some inspiration, and then we'll get to some of the, okay, how can you think about practically applying this? I'm about to share a couple of slides. They're super busy and detailed. You'll have access to these so they can be your kind of inspiration guides. But I just wanted to share some examples of actual other organizations and institutions where a leader has had to either create clarity, maintain clarity, or recalibrate. Again, just to get the juices flowing for you about what you might be able to do. All right, so I'm going to start actually. I have a little bit of a wrong order. Here we go. We're going to start with how we proactively create clarity to build momentum. I'm not going to talk through all 5 examples on here, but there was a couple that I thought were interesting. Again, these are real examples of other leaders, other mainly CEOs and senior leaders at different institutions and organizations. So this first slide is about how these individuals proactively created clarity to build momentum. So let's start with that first one that you see there, Jill Ellis, who is the former head coach of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team. The issue that they were facing was confusion in tone that, oh, this actually, I think somehow my slide got a little bit messed up. Sorry, that's not the right one for the women's national soccer team. Yeah. Oh, you know what I think happened? I think our pictures, yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I'll fix this before we send this out to you. Let's go then to daily pre-service briefings. This one is right. So Danny Meyer, many of you know him. He's the founder of many restaurants, actually a lot of restaurants in New York. He's also the founder of Shake Shack. But the issue was the guests facing mistakes due to lack of real-time knowledge about what was actually on the menu, special reservations or new policies. So what Danny did was a daily lineup where the day's chef or manager reviews all the new dishes, clarifies reservations. So if, there's a big party coming in or it's, somebody's birthday or some sort of celebration, and highlights any staff or front of house's changes. So again, this is getting everybody together to talk about these. The briefings are highly interactive and it gives people the opportunity to ask questions about ingredients, plating, recommended wine pairings, etc. And for those of you, he actually has a great book, by the way, that I think came out a year and a half ago. But he really talks about how he addressed some of the issues that he was having in his restaurants. And this is a great example of one of them. But what he was trying to achieve was a really high bar and high standards across for everybody who worked there. It didn't matter what your role is. It didn't matter if you were a sous chef. It didn't matter if you were the dishwasher. It didn't matter if you were wait staff. But really treating everyone as a critical part of the team. And for the ultimate goal that it was reducing errors and customer complaints, because he was really focused on what the actual experience was. The example right next to him, this is Ken Frazier, former CEO of Merck. The issue there was the escalation of issues as a result of top executives being too far removed from the day-to-day work. Again, I think something that is probably common across many people's worlds. But the practice was visiting a lab in a Merck research facility one day per quarter to shadow, sit in on discussions, and hear from scientists about some of the different hurdles and challenges that they were dealing with. After each one of those sessions that he had, he would compile a brief internal member for different executives on his team, detailing what he heard and flagging any things that he thought that team should address. So this is really about getting embedded. Sometimes lack of clarity arises because we actually we're not close enough to what's actually going on. So how can you actually get closer to the work that's going on to your team? Are you actually spending enough time with the team to really understand what it looks like, what they're working on versus, just making some assumptions maybe from an update that you might be getting. So those are a couple examples of how you can proactively create clarity to build momentum. To think about maintaining clarity, again, this is about, you've kind of already kicked off. How do you think about maintaining clarity that you believe you've already set. And again, really thinking about as different things are happening in the organization or the institution, how you can actually respond to that. So I'll do the couple I'll share from here. I'll start with the Indra Nooya, the former CEO of PepsiCo. Pepsi is actually right in my backyard. It's about 20 minutes from my house. So I know a lot of folks that work there. The issue they were having was around operational discipline and balancing financial results with health, environmental, and talent-focused goals. Again, I'm sure you all can appreciate we're all asked to do a lot. And again, it seems like when everything's a priority, what is actually the priority? So what they did at Pepsi was monthly calls during which each department head shared how new products, marketing strategies, or supply chain tweaks were aligned with this thing they called performance with purpose. And so they had a number of different things like reducing sodium or calories. But the calls often featured progress metrics, so how they were actually progressing against those things. And it also gave people the opportunity to ask questions, again, kind of similar that we saw on the slide previously, so that they could actually clarify in the moment instead of, again, just interpreting or making assumptions about something. The other one I'll share on this one, I'll go to Tim Cook, who many of you know, CEO of Apple. Probably a lot of us have some Apple products. And he did morning email updates. So I'm not advocating this, but he would send early morning emails. And it was based on overnight intel that he would review. And these came from, sales data, information from supplier. And he would send targeted emails out to senior leaders highlighting top priorities or potential risks. Again, this is another example of making sure that there's that line of communication out, even though this was not a live meeting as we saw in some of the other ones. But at least clarifying so that people aren't just, trying to interpret some of these things themselves. They have his thoughts as well. And then they could reply back to that with questions. So those are two I'll share from Maintaining Clarity to reinforce direction and focus. And I see you say we're seeing the presenter screen. Is that better? Is that bigger? Yes, no? Somebody tell me.
Yes, bigger.
Bigger.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's better.
great. Sorry, I messed up on there. Okay. And then on our last one, sorry, let me get back. Okay. And then our last one is about how do you recalibrate and re-clarify. So again, a number of examples here, and I will send this out. I know it's hard to read, but just wanted to make the point that there are a lot of examples of different things that that people are trying. So one of the ones I love on this one, Jennifer Hyman's the co-founder and CEO of Rent the Runway. Some of you may be familiar with it. It allows you to rent different clothing and accessories. So borrow it for a period of time and send it back so you don't actually have to buy it. And the issue Rent the Runway was dealing with was just really inventory management. And their system would malfunction. There was a lot of technical issues that were going on with the platform that they were using. But it really was impacting their customer experience and they were getting a lot of complaints. So what Jennifer and her team at Rent the Runway did was a group of different people from different disciplines, so operations, engineering, customer service, would meet every morning to review updated data on order backlogs, system error rates, customer complaints that they had received. And then the team would prioritize orders for events that were happening that week. So it got everyone together that was maybe responsible for different parts of things that were happening to actually have that conversation. And with that, they were actually, number one, able to address some of the issues that were coming up. But from a longer term perspective, they were able to actually understand some of the dependencies that those different groups had on each other. And actually, as a result of that, in this daily practice, they actually started changing some of their operating norms and ways of working. So those are just some examples, again, to give you some inspiration. I'll share these out so you can read through in more detail. As you'll see, they're all a little bit different. They have a little bit of a different flavor. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not, let me just take, what Danny Meyer is doing and apply that. You have to think about your own context, obviously, the industry you're in, the organization or institution that you're part of. But these are just meant to, as you think about building and activating on the situation that you identified, some ideas. One of the patterns I think you will see across actually all three of these slides and what people are doing is a lot of them actually deal with bringing people together, either to have a meeting, so bringing people together live to have a meeting, or at least documenting something, whether it's in an email or another type of document, to be explicit about what's going on. And so I know we were talking earlier about sometimes it does feel like we just don't have the time and the capacity. And that's what's really critical here is to actually make the time that is actually part of the work is to make the time so that you're providing that clarity. Because if people are just doing stuff and it's not aligned to whatever the broader goal or the mission is, then it's actually a waste of time for them and for you. And so that's something to think about when you think about not having the time is how can you actually make the time and bake that in? Because making the time up front to be able to provide that clarity will actually help you move with speed later on. All right, keep us going. So build and activate. So we won't have time to go through in detail, but what I would invite you to do after this is think about the situation that you chose. You already did some work on reflecting and assessing, and think about from those inspirational ideas that others have done, generate some ideas for how you might engage your team and help them see the path forward. And you can think about multiple ideas, and some of them may stick and some of them won't. And then really think about activating. So make a commitment, even if it's just one thing that you'll do differently to try to address the lack of clarity that seems to exist. My advice here would be start small, and really thinking about one explicit thing that you could be more clear on. Don't try to boil the ocean, right? So there's probably a lot of things that we don't have clarity on. Pick one thing, maybe the most important thing that you care about, your boss cares about, that the organization is really focused on, and just think about that one example and trying something out there. And as with anything, these are habits, right? So this just then becomes habits of how you think about in any situation, again, whether it's personal or professional, how you can lead with clarity. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I have one more section to share with you around remaining steady and some things to think about there. But I just want to pause and see if there's any questions or comments on this framework and even some of the ideas and inspirations. You're welcome to unmute or you can share in the chat.
I have a question. I have to leave soon, but I was just curious about your experience in dealing with ambiguity and clarity. Like, what is there an example you can share about a situation where you weren't clear and how you went about it, or just your daily practice of clarity in your role?
Yeah, great question. So I will give you an example. So my boss and I are, we have very different styles. We have very different communication styles. And I started in my role about 18 months ago. And so she was new to me, right? A new boss. And what I realized early on is we would, and we talked all the time. We emailed, we pinged, we texted, all that kind of stuff. And what I realized was there was something missing in those exchanges because I would then produce for her whatever it was she had asked of me, and it wasn't hitting the mark, or she had a question about it. And so what I started doing is when I would get an ask or a request, instead of just taking that and going and doing the thing and then sharing back, the first step I would always do is actually go back and align on here's what I think I heard you say. And I would outline, I said, here's what I think I heard you say, this, and this. The outcome we're trying to achieve is this. These are the assumptions I'm making.
Mm,
And I have to tell you, it has been a game changer for me because I can't tell you how many times I was completely off, or I was interpreting something, or sometimes I think I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So she would send me something and I'm like, oh, yes, this is awesome. I'll do this. And it wasn't exactly what she needed. Or sometimes I was making something bigger than it actually needed to be. And she would come back and say, actually, no, it's much simpler. It's just this. And I would say, okay, got it. So that has been really helpful for me. Again, it takes a little bit of time up front to just get that, re-clarify. I think this is what I heard you say. I think this is the problem we're trying to solve, or this is the outcome we want. Get aligned on that. And then by the way, just in kind of keeping it, re-clarifying, when you get stuck, I would encourage, you to go back, and I do that too sometimes with her, where I'll say, okay, here's what we were doing based on this new information, new data, whatever it is. Are we keeping going or are we changing things?
yeah, that's great. And just one quick follow-up. What about in situations where communication isn't great among team members? Like there's some dynamics at play there where somebody just will, if you go to them and say, here's what I heard you say, they're gonna roll their eyes, or they're just gonna like, give you a very basic answer. How do you approach it in those types of situations?
Yeah. So my coaching there would be I find open-ended questions really powerful. So, asking people just questions. How are you feeling? How is that going? Where are you getting stuck? I always actually find instead of saying, are there any questions? A better way to approach that is to say, hey, I just shared a lot. What questions do you have? Right? It's a small change in how I phrase that, but it actually invites people to be a bit more open. Um, I also think instead of, telling somebody just to do something, again, using language that's a bit more opening, such as, I wonder if we did this differently. I wonder what would happen if something. And sometimes I find those little tweaks in language where you might have, to your point, just that communication barrier can be really helpful. The biggest thing for me is getting people to actually talk. If you can get people to start talking, and that's why the open-ended questions I think are really powerful. I find that goes a long way than kind of the one-sided, kind of yes or no questioning.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, any other questions? If not, I will move. I know we only have a little bit of time left. So I'll go through this a little bit quickly. And again, you'll get the support material. What I wanted to end with is, again, just recognition of how heavy the world feels and everything going on. I'm so happy the Olympics are on, by the way, because it's like a feel-good something like every night for me to get lost in. But I want to share 3 habits. So I shared kind of the framework, the overall kind of theoretical framework for leading with clarity. But what does it feel like when you have to be the steady one, right? And this is obviously a lot around clarity, but it's also clarity when things just feel heavy and emotions are high. So I won't go through all this chat stuff. I'm going to get to the good stuff. So I just want to share 3 habits for tense times. Again, this also helps. It might not actually completely create clarity, but what it does help is eliminate spin. So I'm just going to share 3 quick ones. Calm first response, 60-second self-check, and structured follow through. And here's how it works. So calm first response. So there's something I like to think about kind of in the power of threes, this three-step process. But in crisis or in hard times, people watch how you respond as much as what you say. And so this is something we use. Again, I work a lot with our people business partners who are kind of on the ground with our people day to day. And it works like this. First, you acknowledge, I hear that you're worried about X. I hear that you're worried that we have a new CEO. Then you anchor. So you talk about what you know and what hasn't changed. This is really powerful. A lot of times we focus on all the stuff we don't know, but we actually know a lot of stuff. So here's what we know right now. We know the new CEO is going to start March 1st. We're still doing our strategic imperatives remain the same. We still need to ship this product as of this date. So really double down on the stuff that is not changing. And then the third thing is you have to give people, when are they going to hear from you next? What's happening next? So commit to, even if it's one thing, here's what's going to happen next. I'm having a call with the executive team next week. After that, I'll revert back with a summary. So acknowledge, anchor, and next step. Again, it may not be all as specific as somebody wants, but it's at least acknowledging to them that you hear them, you understand what that emotion is, you're sharing what you do know, and you're also sharing that there's stuff that we actually do know. Not all of it is up in the air, and then you're committing to a next step. So that's habit one, calm first response. The second one, I call it the 60-second self-check. This is kind of the analogy of put on your own oxygen mask before your child's. So you have to protect your own capacity. We talked a lot about capacity on this call today. So before you respond, this takes time, but it's only 60 seconds. Before you respond to anything, and I acknowledge it's harder to do in the moment than when you actually have time that you can like respond to an email. But take 60 seconds and ask yourself, what am I personally feeling? What do I want to model in this conversation? And what is mine not to own? So what am I personally feeling about the CEO transition of my company? I'm feeling a little unsettled and uncertain about what this means. What do I want to model in this conversation with my team? I want to model clarity and optimism. And what is mine not to own? I don't know what changes may come. And I'm not going to speculate about that because that's not my place to own. So that's how it works. And it literally, I mean, I just went through that in less than 60 seconds. You can actually do that in 60 seconds. The third one, and perhaps I would argue the most important, is structured follow through. So what tends to happen is sometimes there's certain people, and sometimes this is based on roles you might play in an organization or just your own style. But where there's people that everybody go to for clarity, for just kind of therapy when something crazy is going on in the world. And people might be coming 24/7. And that's not sustainable. You can't be responsive. You can't show up 24/7. By the way, this holds true as much in the personal world as it does in the professional world. So again, just two quick practices, batch communications. So again, whatever the thing is, you can create one FAQ document that you can send out to everyone, a video, but just batch the communication. So you're not just doing with these one-offs. Someone reaches out, you direct them somewhere, or you just send out, one email that directs people somewhere. And then the second thing is set expectations. I know there's a lot of uncertainty with the CEO transition. I'm going to hold office hours on Friday from 12 to 1. Join with any questions. Feel free to submit your questions in advance, or just give, clear windows when you're available for people. This is really important because it protects your own capacity. And it means that you yourself are not going to burn out. So that's all of the content. I know I shared a lot in an hour, and we will make this available to you. But hopefully there's a couple of nuggets that you took away on, number one, how you can think about leading with clarity. Again, thinking about the framework and those 4 steps. And then really thinking about these 3 habits where you can protect your own capacity so that you're showing up, how you're showing up, and what you're saying is actually helpful. And even if it's not so explicitly giving people what they need on the clarity side, it's also not contributing to the noise and spin. With that, Christina, I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This was incredible. I learned lots of new nuggets and have a lot to think about. So we so appreciate you being with us this Friday afternoon. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. We will send the slides and we'll send a link of the recording sometime next week, and hope that you will join us for future Professional Development Month events. We have them for the rest of the month, and especially National Networking Night, where we are having concurrent events on February 24th from coast to coast. So it's going to be a really powerful night of Terps coming together. So thank you all and have a wonderful afternoon.